So let's get started. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Welcome, one and all. Just a few announcements to get started. You received a URL to the download of Isopanishad. If you don't have it, it's vedabase.io. And you can get the edition of the Isopanishad that we're using. That's this one. Come to that in a minute as well. If you haven't already downloaded the handouts, there are two handouts, and you'll find them in the chat function of our Zoom discussion here. We're scheduled for 3 weeks of these, possibly a little longer, depending on level of interest. And let me go into a screen share and we'll get into seeing some of the images here as well. There we go. So just again to let you know, we are going to be recording these sessions. So if you miss a session, you can find it on our Facebook page, which is Gita Wisdom Teachings. Or if you wish, you can also find it on YouTube. If you search for Gita Wisdom Joshua Greene on YouTube, you'll find the Gita Wisdom YouTube channel there, which all of this is being put together by my dear friend and colleague, Anuradha. Come and say hello there. There she
Hi.
is. She gets the credit for putting all this together. Please keep your mic muted starting now, if you don't mind. If you have a question, type it into the chat function or simply type, I have a question, and then after the yakking part of this is done, I'll call on you. And if there's not enough time to get to all of your questions, we'll start tomorrow's session with those questions. So you all get to ask whatever you'd like. The bathrooms are behind you and to the left. Let's see, what else can I, all right, what can you expect? Well, here are the takeaways. Ideally, you will get to know enough about this remarkable text, Sri Isopanishad, that you will be able to explain it to others. I know many of you are teaching, and if you wanted to introduce Isopanishad, in theory, this series should equip you with enough knowledge to be able to explain Isopanishad to others. This will also give you a better understanding of the connection between the theory and concepts of Isopanishad and practical application in life. We'll learn some of the language and terms. We want to enrich vocabulary through these discussions, and the result should be a more exciting understanding of your spiritual life. So why a series on Isopanishad in particular? Well, for the past 15 years, as most of you know, the Gita Wisdom gatherings, which started at Jiva Mukti back in 2006, I believe, has attempted to connect the millennial wisdom of the ancient Sanskrit texts with the world we know, the world we live in. Vedanta, if you will, not as an ancient historic tract, but as a lens into the unchanging nature of the reality of the world that we inhabit. So there are different ways of acquiring knowledge. We'll describe what the authority of the Isopanishad is here. The word epistemology describes the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. And there are three basic methods. One is called pratyaksha, meaning based on observable, experiential knowledge. You see an apple, you know an apple. Seeing is believing. Anuman is more abstract. It's based on reasoning, on argument, on indirect experience. For example, no one has ever seen an electron. We deduce the existence of electrons from the evidence pointing to their existence. And then third, which is the authority of Isopanishad, Shabda Praman, knowledge handed down from higher authority. This is also known as Shruti, or transcendental sound. Now, we need to be a little cautious when discussing the nature of reality. We can easily fall too far to one side, too far to the other side, too far into pratyaksha or anuman, the rational or scientific methods of acquiring knowledge of our life and what is real, we can become victims of our own anti-intuitive biases, right? I only believe the math. I only accept what I can see. That empiric approach to what we know is safe, but it can also cut us off from deeper dimensions of knowledge, which cannot be approached strictly through empiric methods. So too far into Shabda, too far into the experiential side, however, can lead in the extreme to religious fanaticism. God is the only reality, nothing else counts. And sadly, the middle ground between these two is often overlooked. Let's say what happens if we change the language? For example, if we replace the word soul with consciousness, what does that do to balance the scale? If we replace a surcharged word like God or Lord with the phrase primal origins, what does that do to balance the different approaches to knowledge? If we replace the phrase purposeful creation, if we substitute that with multi-dimensional universe, what does that do to help balance our understanding of the different dimensions of knowledge and what we accept as real and essential? So we start with the definition of the name Isopanishad, the path to coming closer to Isha, the supreme cause or the supreme controller. It is the shortest of the 108 Upanishadic texts. It is found in the final sections of the Yajur Veda. It's a somewhat intellectual text in the sense that if you read bhakti text like the works of the Goswamis of Vrindavan, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, you'll find a very deep emotional understanding of the core being's relationship with creation that's different from the approach of the Isopanishad, which frankly is the story of someone who is about to die. It's very short. 18 verses is very short. But within that span of 18 verses, we go from an intellectual, dispassionate look at the nature of the universe, the nature of reality around us, deeper, 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 and deeper until we come to a moment of pure emotion. So that's one of the reasons why Isopanishad is considered the most revered of all of the Upanishadic texts. So what is the authority of the Isopanishad? Well, it's not a laboratory report. It's not physical theory. It presents itself as transcendental knowledge, as Shruti knowledge, meaning coming from an outside source. And well, that's already a little bit of trouble because reasonable people will say that the Isopanishad, like all scripture, was written by fallible human beings. It's a belief. It's a religious text. If this were at Hofstra right now, this class, there would have certain protocols that I'd have to be following. It would be approached as a historic text, as a work of literature, as a cultural product from a particular place in the world, a particular history of the world, and at a particular time and for a particular purpose. What we're going to be doing in our sessions here is different, slightly different from that kind of an academic approach. You might call it a hermeneutic approach or an exegetical approach. Hermeneutics is a discipline which includes an inside understanding, an inside approach or analysis to the written, verbal, and nonverbal content of a culture or a work. An exegesis or an exegetical approach focuses primarily on the verbal, and the words, the grammar. So from within the tradition, both of these approaches, whether it's just strictly the literature or the larger cultural analysis, both of these approaches look at the knowledge, the wisdom, the words being presented from the inside, even if it's only hypothetical. We're going to be hypothetically accepting that there is substantive value to the teachings of the Isopanishad. And we're to allow ourselves to approach an understanding of that text from within. That is to say, not only literally and morally, the external understanding, but moving into the metaphorical or allegorical, and then finally to the mystical, or the anagogical is the technical word, meaning of the verses of the text. So where does all of this come from? Well, the culture assumes that insight into the nature of reality is possible through contemplation, meditation, yogic disciplines, things that are way beyond the limitations of material tools of observation. Scholarship alone is wonderful in order to get an accurate reading of a text. The downside is that it tends to pigeonhole wisdom texts into an historic time. It strips the wisdom text of its transcendental dimension and becomes a somewhat dry academic exercise. So according to the tradition, Vyasa is credited with having codified this previously oral tradition of knowledge in written form. So his understanding of the texts was not academic, it wasn't through debate, it was through an active participation in the reality pointed to by the words themselves. So we're going to be looking at the verses. There are 18 verses very quickly. The invocation defines the nature of ultimate reality. Verses 1 through 3 of Isopanishad describe how to live in the world. You might compare that with the yama and niyamas of Patanjali, in a way that puts us in touch with that ultimate reality. Verses 4 through 8 define Isa, the supreme being, and our relationship with that ultimate reality. Verses 9 through 14 describe how to revive that relationship, what to do and what not to do to enter into that deeper, you might say, extra-empiric or supra-empiric reality. And then the final verses, this is extraordinary, 16 and 17 are a direct call to Isha, a direct call to the Supreme Being for a revelation of his personal nature. And then the final verses, 17 and 18, are prayers for advancement in our yoga practice. It's a prayer before dying. So in that sense, yoga is not just how to live, but it's also how to die. And Isopanishad is this very visceral encounter with that dimension of the yoga texts. So I refer you to the handouts on this that will describe for you the place of the Isopanishad within the Vedic Sanskrit library. And I put this one slide in because I thought it was a good parallel for you. Some of you may be familiar with Hannah Arendt, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, a political theorist, who argued that Western philosophy focuses too much on that passive study and on debate, and that the via contemplativa, if I've got that right, the contemplative life neglects the active dimension, the vida activa. So she came up with the idea of what she called participatory democracy, which weds these two sides together. And that's what happens in Isopanishad as well. Her idea was namely that the value of philosophy is its application in practical action. Now that's very Krishna conscious, if you will. That's very Bhagavad Gita, that spiritual life needs to make a practical difference in the world. So it goes the other way as well. If all that we have is our yoga practice, if all that we have is our meditation, and we don't study the text from an intellectual perspective, from a deep analytical perspective, then it risks becoming sentimental and in the extreme fanatical. So the foundation of transcendent knowledge is a balance between these two, they're called panthas, these two paths, the Bhagavata Pantha and the Pancharatrika Pantha, the study of the sacred texts and the practice, whether it's the Archana Seva, the worship of deity on an altar, the yoga and meditation, both have to be there in order for the balance and for the ultimate richness of that knowledge to come through. So we just went through the summary of the verses. Here they are spelled out for you again. this is the invocation to the Isopanishad. And we can, if you know it, you're welcome to chant along with me. We should do a recitation of this verse together. Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate that's a typo. Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate. And there's a melody that goes with this. Now, some of you may be familiar with the recording on this album. This is the Radha Krishna Temple album that George Harrison produced. You can find that on YouTube. If you just search for Isopanishad, George Harrison's recording is there. But I also recommend the one that you're seeing on the screen just now. This is a beautiful album that Ravi Shankar created, produced by George Harrison, of traditional Sanskrit chants and mantras with the if you will, unadorned melodies. It's an extraordinary recording in the sense that George and Ravi, who had such outstanding creative musical skills, honor the power of simplicity in the traditional melodies and chants. And you don't see any embellishments. You don't hear any musicality. There's no one attempting to demonstrate how gifted they are musically. It's a beautiful collection. And the melody that you will hear on that album is slightly different from the one I know, but you're welcome to chant with me if you know it. This is the one from George's album, Radha Krishna Temple. It goes like this. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. So you're welcome to chant with me if you'd like. Now you can unmute your microphones and chant along with me. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Now that's a mantra that's just as powerful as any other. The Om mantra is there, the Hare Krishna mantra. The effect of these words is just as profound. So each of these mantras can be chanted as a part of your morning meditations. Just before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to show you a couple of things. Let me move out of the screen share here for a moment. All right. If you'd like a simple and approachable introduction to Isopanishad, this is the edition I recommend to you. It's the one that you can download from that database.io website. If you're looking to go deeper, that's how thick this is. This is Radha Krishna's translation and commentary on the principal Upanishads. Now, there are 108 Upanishads. In this edition, I think he does about 12 or 15. And what's interesting about it is that Radha Krishnan will cite other scriptures. He'll cite the Bible. He'll cite literary figures and their works as a way of surfacing how the wisdom of Isopanishad is reflected in contemporary or quasi-contemporary literature. So if you wanted to go deeper, that would be one way to do it. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to go through a brief history of the Vedas according to the tradition, and we're going to tell the creation story, one more dimension of background to our understanding of Isopanishad. And in the weeks ahead, we'll be looking at some of the parallels between creation as described in Isopanishad and the more cutting-edge ideas in contemporary cosmological physics and other sources of contemporary view of the world around us. So I'm done yakking it up. Now we're going to get to some questions. Let's see what we've got. No questions. Okay, thanks. That's our show. Thanks for coming. Any questions at all? You're welcome to just unmute your phone, speak up, or put it on the chat board. Julia, are you waving or raising your hand?
I just got a chat message that said hello to me, so I was
Oh,
waving back
that's
because I'm lazy.
that's fine.
I do have a question, though. I mean, it's not very deep question, but the Principal Upanishad book that you were holding up, I'm not familiar with that person that translated those and gave commentary. So Radha Krishna, I don't know who that is.
Sarvapalli Radhakrishna was the
Thank you.
first vice president of post-colonial India. When India gained its independence, 1947, I believe it was, Radhakrishnan was the first vice president of the country. And he translated many of the Sanskrit texts. He was what's known as a Bajraloka or Bengali intellectual. And the Bajraloka community in general leans toward the Shankarite Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta interpretation of the Sanskrit text, which, as we've discussed in the past, if you've been to any of the Gita Wisdom sessions, this is almost inevitably a part of our talk, that there is this one view of the undifferentiated Brahman energy as the goal of yoga, and the other a retaining of individual identity in order to engage in a loving exchange. So Radhakrishnan tends to veer toward that impersonal or Mayavada understanding of the Sanskrit text, but still he does a fine job of giving translations, commentaries, and I recommend it if you're looking to go deeper. So we still have a few minutes if anyone has a question. Here's a question from Ananda Vilas, who asks, did you say that absolute truth is conscious? Well, that's one of the grand questions raised in all of the wisdom traditions. What is the nature of absolute truth? And that's the meeting ground, if you will, for all schools of inquiry, whether it be the physicalist scientific approach, or whether it's the abstract theoretical philosophies, or whether it's the experiential yogic traditions. They're all geared toward asking and answering this question: is the absolute truth an insentient source of energy, or does it have personality? Does it have emotion? Does it have a way to interact with other beings? That's where we're going in this discussion about Isopanishad. So stay tuned. We'll get to that next time. Let's see.
Hare Krishna, I have a question.
Yes, Carly. Haribol.
Thank you so much for giving class.
Good to see you.
So maybe I misheard, but maybe you can help me to understand. You said that this invocation, Purnamada, is as powerful as Maha Mantra. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Sure. A real mantra, an authentic mantra, is a non-material sound that has withstood the test of time. It came down from an original transcendent source. And the Upanishads in particular are considered an extension of the original Vedic pronouncements by the Supreme Being. So there's Shruti texts. The Vedic texts are divided into two general categories, Shruti and Smriti. Shruti means Shrunu, that's that which is heard directly from God, from the Supreme. And those texts incorporate the Upanishads, and among the Upanishads, Isopanishad is most prominent. So it is considered a Shruti text, therefore directly enunciated by the Supreme, and as powerful as the Mahamantra. Now, Mahamantra has some additional benefits, you might say, in the sense that all of the words within the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna and Rama, are personal names of the Supreme Being. So it's a very, very intimate way of addressing ourselves to divinity. Upanishad includes the Om Pranav mantra, as well as this invocation of the qualities of the Supreme Being. In that sense, they're all absolute. I wanted to ask my teacher, Srila Prabhupada, whose edition of Isopanishad we are consulting here, why is it that there seem to be higher and lower distinctions in things transcendental? I was specifically asking him about the gopis. I say, if in all of your books you say we should attempt to love Krishna like the gopis. Now the gopis have a conjugal relationship with God. It's considered the most ecstatic, the most intimate, the most personal way of expressing love for God. And I asked him, why would anyone want to be anything else? Why would someone want to be a cow or a tree or a cowherd boy or a senior resident of Krishna's village Vrindavan, which are these other rasas of passive or friendship or parental, if Madhuda rasa, the ecstatic conjugal affection, is considered the highest? And he said, you haven't understood. In the spiritual world, if you're a big glass or if you're a little glass, when you're full, you're full. So Isopanishad may be in some higher sense on a secondary dimension below the Mahamantra, because Mahamantra is all the most personal names of God. But in a yet higher transcendental sense, it's all of that same spiritual Shruti sound. And when we get to the conclusion of Isopanishad, you'll see just how intimate Isopanishad can be. It's an extraordinary conclusion to these 18 verses. So thank you. That's a wonderful question.
Thank you so much. Wonderful answer. Thank you, Prabhu.
You're welcome. Good to have you with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've come to the end of our first half-hour gathering. It's wonderful to see you all and to be with you again. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening when we'll discuss Mantra 1 of Isopanishad. I urge you to read it along with the commentary from Srila Prabhupada's edition of the book. And until then, please accept this Vaishnava Pranam prayer and appreciation to you all. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu pevacha patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namaha. Thank you all. It's a wonderful pleasure to see you here this evening. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogesvara.
Thanks a
Bye,
lot.
everyone.